Hello, everybody. This is Dean Val here with Tim and Dean Kevin, and we're on the new Kevin Smith, The Great Witness. The New Adventures series is called. It's September 26, 2021. We're going to be listening to Kevin's experiences and commenting, asking questions, and seeing if we can become more aware through that. So welcome, Kevin.
This real side experience seemed to be, overall, a view of what may transpire in regards to the simulator. A simulator that is the effect overall of the consciousness, and as the consciousness becomes restricted and overladen with ideas of nonsensical distortion, so does the simulator go through its stages of decay, impacting and condensing in on itself as a reflection of the consciousness that becomes ever more restricting, to the inevitable conclusion of a simulator implosion, as everything impacts in on itself, with the black holes becoming ever more prevalent. And as I have been shown in real side experiences I have shared, everything collapses in on itself and is compacted down into one focal point, like one final black hole. Then the simulator winks out of existence. Although there do seem to be a number of additional features that seem to be set to occur before this final simulator implosion moment, perhaps unique to this particular simulator, as everything agreement-wise is based on decision and agreement, and the consciousness of one simulated realm will very much differ from another. And so, what transpires in each will overall differ also, including perhaps the features and symptoms that correspond with each simulator as they go through their phases and eventually implode. Although a simulator implosion isn't necessarily a standard, in actuality, there's no reason why any simulator needs go through its cycles and implode. It all depends on the consciousness, with what is decided and agreed upon overall as to if this situation will occur. But it does seem to generally be the case with creational realms. For as free will is established, and individuals generally then decide along restricting idea lines that don't make sense or support life, and indeed any literal idea agreed to and clung onto can be described as restriction, as it will add to the consciousness, a consciousness that then produces the corresponding effects, and all these created ideas compound and stack up and culminate in a consciousness overall that is overburdened with these restricting cause and effect generating ideas, all necessary for the process of is recognition through the comparisons they provide, but an overburdened and compounded consciousness will effect the simulator through its phases of decay and deterioration. This real side experience then would present as though a view from the real awareness, a real awareness that oversees and is through everything creational, all the simulation and the personal self-consciousnesses that effects it. This expressed here a little like you might see in the old Charlton Heston God movies, where the gods are looking over creation from their positional overviews and are observing the entirety of what's taking place in creation, though creation seemingly contained on one relatively small, in comparison to the size of creation overall, viewing table. I would see then overall a representation of the entire simulator, as was my impression from this real awareness overview position. The first part of this experience seemed to suggest, with the combination of personal self-visuals and real awareness impressions, that an effort was in effect to somehow boost the power of the simulator overall, as though perhaps this would afford it more time. For I would see the simulator in its overall entirety, and then it was as though it received an upgrade, which resulted in the overall holographic visuals that all in the simulator would be perceiving through their personal self-decoding apparatus, as their idea agreements are converted into computer game-like illusionary virtual reality experiences. The visuals suddenly would become pixelated, lose definition. It was almost as though the entire simulated game of this creational realm had been somehow enhanced, like I said, as though upgraded, but as though a certain mechanic of it wasn't powerful enough to then convert the enhancement into graphics, as though the overall computer wasn't powerful enough to convert the now upgraded game into clear visuals on the overall screen, and the best that it could do was rather present pixels and indefinable shapes and geometry. As this is a simulation, and with parallels to computer games in regards to its construction, it does seem as though the foundation of it comprises of data-like streams of frequencies, which are all the ideas that make up the overall consciousness. These idea frequency data streams can also be represented as geometry, which would then be the foundation state of the simulator, before the apparatus of the physical vehicles decodes the consciousness of frequency and geometrical ideas into holographic virtual reality simulation. And so, if the mechanics, the conversion apparatus, is unable to convert the ideas into simulation, then geometry is very likely all that will be seen. So it seemed as though, as I said, some effort had been undertaken to massively enhance the overall simulator in some beneficial, making sense with life way. Evidently then something undertaken by Dwayne with the backing of the guides and life. But by doing so, the overall apparatus of all individuals in the simulator, their decoding mechanics through the physical vehicles, were unable to render the upgraded simulator into holographic simulation. I have had real side experiences which suggested the possibility of an alternative simulator being constructed, that those that decide to release all agreements that bind them to this current simulator could possibly transition into a new simulator absent of the infection of control and restriction. Because, of course, if your consciousness affects and is part of a particular simulator, you can't shift simulators if you hold to the current consciousness, as any ideas of it must always affect into the simulator you are wanting to move from, that rather anchors you to it, as your consciousness is a part of the overall consciousness that affects the current simulator. You can't extract yourself from a computer game and enter another if you continue to play the original game, which then disallows this simulator or game transfer, simply because you are deciding this effectively, deciding to play in this simulator. You would, in theory, have to completely unshackle yourself from the current consciousness and rather transition into another prepared consciousness that effects into what could possibly be a more pristine golden epoch style simulator, that you could continue your awareness process uninterfered with by the dark forces. This was an option seemingly being made available, but in this recent real side experience, this was not so much a preparation for transition to another simulator, but more as though another project to boost somehow this current simulator, that maybe it would afford more time and waylay the inevitable implosion. But there would be a transition period. How long in cause and effect time, who can say? But a period where all simulator dwellers, with the inability to decode the consciousness into simulation, maybe it would be just a brief transition, like in the blink of an eye, but enough that every being in the simulator may have a few moments where all they see is geometry. For having upgraded the overall simulated game in some fashion, resulting in the overall mechanics of all physical vehicle apparatus unable to decode the consciousness into simulated graphics, was it required then for a huge energy increase to be fed into the simulator, as though it were additional energy from the ears, as though, having upgraded the overall game, that now upgraded mechanics were required to handle the new upgrade and render it into perceivable holographic simulated graphics. And this next phase, this mighty energy surge, would make this so. The visuals were coupled with my real awareness impressions, with additional clarification provided by another individual, who would stand beside me as we overlooked the simulator and observed this potential occurrence. I had the impression this other was a real guide, but one who had assumed the form of the boxer Mike Tyson, as though he was representing or hinting at something through this very form he had adopted. A boxer would embody warrior, gladiatorial, combat-like spirit, and very often, as we go through the process of creation to become more aware, the analogy Dwayne uses is of a boxer like Rocky, constantly being knocked down, but getting back up and forging on. So perhaps something along these lines of, despite how bad things get with the simulator, Dwayne and the real guides will keep trying new things, attempting new efforts, regardless of the seeming impossibility of the projects they take on. Projects that, of course, involve the overall consciousness, which then are agreement dependent, and therein always lies the difficulty with pulling off the various beneficial schemes and efforts. Perhaps this effort was unsuccessful, or maybe I was then shown what may happen should it fail and the simulator continue to go through its deterioration. For as I said, this grand upgrading of the simulator scheme was really just to play for extra time, not a solution to the simulator situation, because ultimately the fate of the simulator always rests with the consciousness and the agreements through it, and that does seem to be on automatic self-destruct now, and all that can be done are attempts at prolonging the simulator where agreements allow, or perhaps options for simulator switching, as I mentioned and was shown on previous real side experiences. Because now I saw what seemed to be a black scourge surging across the entirety of the simulator, throughout all the life levels of it then, as I watched on from my overview position. The black wave seemed to consist of twisted, nightmarish creatures that would swarm and consume every being they came across, irrespective of the recipient's consciousness, be they ill-intended or not, controlled and controller alike. This I have also seen on previous recounted real side experiences, whereas the simulator nears its death spiral, a great wave of darkness surges through creation, a kind of a fear wave. More that it's the darkness that will befall the simulator and all within it, as the consciousness compacts to a point that effects into the simulator going dark, and with the inability for all within it to create anything. Such an occurrence is, of course, coupled with the understandable reaction of created emotional fear. And so, as this wave of darkness spreads and makes its final enveloping run, which then has the simulator shrouded in a complete darkness, so is this wave charged with the fear, and is aptly named then the fear wave, that which Paul Twitchell made mention of also. Very often I have seen this fear wave as a blackness, but also as bugs or insect creatures that swarm and envelop everything. It also could represent that at that stage in the simulator's deterioration, that with the consciousness at its most distorted with its restriction, as it must be to effect the final simulator death spiral, so must this reflect not only in the simulator overall, but the body types. And so, were there ever a time in the simulator's long history where you may see extreme distortion of body forms, this would be the time, when the simulator is sputtering toward its end. At this moment, I rather found myself engaged with this simulated view of overall creation, as though a transition from the real awareness aside from it to an agreement with it, which had me embroiled in the effects, and thus I was also automatically swarmed by these twisted, bug-like creatures, that very likely represented the fear wave that engulfs everything and everyone indiscriminately, as I said. My impressions were that I was now being shown the extent to which I had successfully positioned myself with life, through my awareness and recognition with the ears, that I could extricate myself from the simulator at the time when this final simulator death spiral may take place. For to remain caught up with the consciousness, to be clinging onto anything of it, to not be unshackled from its taplines that bind you to the doomed simulator it contributes to the effects of, would have you then caught up in a simulator implosion also, and into the darkness you may find yourself, with every other being who chooses creation over recognition of, and standing as the real beings of awareness light with the ears that they actually are. And so, as I said, I was now being shown the extent of my recognition. Would it allow my extrication, or was there still a process of creation, of facing the personal self, of the releasing of agreement and attachment taplines still to address? And so I rather ran through the simulator, the black wave of twisted insect creatures pursuing me, for of course a simulator implosion, and the black wave that precedes it, involves the entire simulator and all the dimensional levels of it. I ran then through all dimensions, as was my impression, unhindered seemingly, that maybe, as things are now in this moment, I have still the process to go, but perhaps an indication that at this future moment, should I continue on my trajectory of a focus and real intent, more of the personal self and creation would I have got through, and perhaps be in a position to supersede a doomed simulator at the time of its death spiral. I ran then to what I construed as the edge of creation, the deep dark border then seemingly, and there standing on the other side of it, representing a standing in the real universes of the ears, aside from the simulator, would be my grandfather. And as I have mentioned before, for me, real guides will not only take on the form of my older brother and father, as guides have a tendency to do with most, but more often as not, a real guide takes the form of my grandfather also. The guide that takes on my grandfather's form, I impression, is REBISAR, and the real guides always are discernible, regardless of their outward assumed forms, through their isness, real standing signatures that they exude. So you can generally detect the genuine guides, or the guides assuming forms, from the actual individuals whose forms they assumed, and any dark force impostors. And although I could recognize the guide, and from the position he stood in, the real universes of the ears, suggesting recognition with the ears, at that moment, quite possibly, I could not move beyond the deep dark border, suggesting something was holding me back, or something yet to be released, addressed, faced, etc., or maybe an insufficient earning of the way. Whatever the reason, I was then swarmed by the bugs, and rather fought them off, that they wouldn't overwhelm me. So I took this as at least an indication that I wouldn't be sucked into the fear that accompanied this black spreading wave. Or maybe I was in fact okay, and was just here to be shown these happenings, so rather had to stick around and investigate further. And so I would, lingering in this immersed with the simulated death spiral future view, and I would bear witness to other factors and features of it. For I would see also a great undulating beneath and all over the very perimeter surface of every inch of the simulator, as though something trying to push its way through from outside of the simulator throughout the entirety of it. I would see a group of other individuals now, although a group not running in fear, as most throughout the simulator were doing, as they were being swarmed by the darkness of twisted beings. This group far more calm and collected, more indifferent to a creation, not engaging emotionally or with mental consideration. So a group of aware individuals then, maybe just featuring here and being afforded this same experience, perchance to bring it back to the physical and share it from their own viewpoint perspectives, which would add to the whole picture and fill in more pieces of the jigsaw. They and I would stand in creation as this bulging mass pushed in from seemingly beyond it, and as I watched at first, I pondered that it was maybe a whale, based on its shape, as it pushed into the simulator's perimeter, and large whales can in fact represent the ears in real side experiences, and perhaps it suggested the ears still trying to make itself known in creation at even this late simulator hour. But then at one point this mass broke through and into the simulator, and I would see that it was in fact a giant shark. And when I say a giant, I mean a shark that was the size of the entire simulator, from a literal, spatial agreed to perspective, as in reality there is no distance and time, as everything is. Although the shark seemed to exude no menace or hostility, as were my impressions, it just was, just like animals are, real awareness connected as they are, although this wasn't exactly a body form animated through awareness, more a representation symbolizing something from outside the simulator, but that which had broken in at this late stage in this simulator death spiral. And in addition were other gigantic simulator-filling animals suddenly manifesting. I don't recollect them all, but I remember one was a wolf, one was a bear, and this aware group would inform me that these creatures wouldn't harm you unless you exuded any kind of attitude, as though to remain in the nowness of the real awareness had you safe. But should you step into your personal self of thoughts, emotions, attitudes, etc., you would be in danger. And then another feature of the simulator deterioration death spiral would take place, though where it fitted in the sequence of events I'm uncertain, if it preceded the fear wave or came after it. Though if the darkness wave heralds a lasting blackness where nothing can be seen or created, possibly then what happened next was prior to that, as this fear wave is usually the final act before simulator implosion. I not only witnessed then, but immersed in the experience as I was, with this aware group, experienced 3 waves of fire. Each were relatively the same, great blanketing waves of fire that spread throughout the simulator, throughout all dimensions of it. As one wave hit, it then would recede, followed by the next, until all three waves of fire had surged through creation, and the group and I would experience and have the sensation of being scalded, burnt, and incinerated by the fire waves, just as a tangible sensation of burning, as though one were actually set ablaze on the physical. And although we were completely obliterated in each fire wave, such was their intensity, we endured, were reconstituted each time, and would have to suffer the next wave, until all three had passed. I most strongly remembered on waking the sensation of my eyeballs melting in my skull, and finding this a particularly unpleasant sensation, and so would hold my hands over my eyes with each fire wave, although this did little to prevent this from taking place. I'm uncertain what this fire represented, maybe a kind of simulator purifying, but perhaps more a feature of the simulator death spiral, for at the stage in the simulator's state of being where individuals are immersed in the darkness that disallows their ability to create, as it is the mechanics of the consciousness and the created ideas that generate simulation, so must something of the overall consciousness be compromised. The idea cause to effect generating mechanics be somehow made dysfunctional, that results in this inability to create within the darkness that has enveloped the simulator. Perhaps these fire waves then are a manifestation, an overall effect of the overall consciousness reaching a critical tipping point in the extent of its restricted compaction, that results in a mechanism that surges through the consciousness and somehow renders the effect generating mechanics of the personal self, that of conversion of consciousness ideas to simulated effect experience, inoperative. And as the experience continued, when the three fire waves had come and gone, the simulator became overall, as though the entirety of it was encased in snow and ice, like an overall simulator ice age. And following that seemed to be a situation where what became the overall expression of a body type or form that seemed prevalent throughout the simulator just prior to the darkness fear wave and just after the simulator generating mechanics had been disabled via the fire waves, was a kind of organic, plant-like, slimy mass that rather spread through the simulators like a kind of collective consciousness, and no other form or expression of a body type did I see. It reminded me a little of one of the Quatermass movies, the one where the creatures are contained in huge cylindrical tanks, and at one point one of the scientists opens a hatch to look inside, and you see this vegetative slimy mass rising, like a kind of animated leafy vegetable soup. So maybe the distortion through the consciousness at that stage is expressed in such a form, maybe literally, as the simulator generating mechanics are shut down, that what's left rather all meshes together in a weird collective way, and this organic mass that then incorporates all the overall consciousness just rather sits there throughout the simulator, doing nothing, unable to create anything. The simulator becomes engulfed in the darkness, and then ultimately the simulator implodes in on itself and winks out of simulated existence, and there the experience would end. Duane, the great writer, responded to this real side experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "The shark, the bear, and the wolf are with the environment. They don't harm the environment. They do handle their situation. So again, something's showing up. So step by step, for those that see it. This has been decided. I decided this a long time ago. This is where REBISAR showed me that this was a big nut to crack. That's an old saying. So he showed me this giant walnut when I decided this. It only takes one to do it. I wait to see what's going on. I'm focused on doing this. That this takes place with this simulator to give people a chance. For as long as I'm here, I don't want to see and watch it destroyed. I want to do something in every which way. Life decides this. The real guides decide this. I made the choice. They decide to back it or not. So that becomes the reality. Like putting away the Queen of Orion and all those adventures. And that's the reason for the Sheriff Mac thing and everything else on the earth. Giving people a chance, supporting those individuals that really do care, etc., that step up and prove it. Again, more than just talking about it, but actually doing it, putting these things out there and facing it, and on the real side too. I just wait to see what becomes evident from the choices, and if all life agrees. It's up to the isness itself, and it knows everything that's taking place, so it doesn't matter what people decide or choose. Life is what it is. And if these individuals have to go through more experiences to wake up, if that's what it takes realistically, then they do. But there is a chance now for people to become more aware, and this is becoming evident with what we're doing and sharing out there in the physical sense. And that multiplies into the whole of creation itself. So I'm picking those positions to support that equal this, and we will see what happens, because again, we need agreement too. It's not that life decides, and there it is. Like the sun shining, it's there. but you have to decide to see and recognize it. You have to decide to step out of your personal selves.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to put in here in the chat after the call a link to Mike Adams and the Health Ranger. He just had a spot, red alert, a couple days ago about the impending spraying of these nanos, particles, skin penetrating viruses. And he, through his intel, he talks about the new wave, basically, that you're talking about, fear wave, the wave that will, like, it looks like it won't distinguish between vaccinated or unvaccinated. It just pretty much kill everybody off, because they can do that. They have that ability to just spray people, and they're doing it already with who knows what. But I'll leave that link in here, but it kind of applies to what you're saying, and we watched this last night, this hour spot from Mike Adams. So, yeah, and the animals, and these animals are not passive. Bear, wolf, shark. We're going to need to be assertive or to be active, not passive, during these times where people are trying to kill you, and help others wake up in the meantime. And like Dwayne said, Sheriff Mack, I just mentioned this other governor from Florida who's implementing fines for those businesses that require vaccination certificates to get in to their store or school. So there's people out there doing things to offset what's going on. If enough people do it, then maybe something will come of it that we'll see. And then early on, you mentioned something in my notes here, something about imagination. I don't know what you were referencing, but again, anything is possible. So using that aspect that we have, that tool, we can imagine, we can do something instead of worrying or stressing about what's going on. We can do something here in the creation, in the simulation, with our imagination. And as Dwayne points out, do something that relates to what's going on, not just like something that you imagine, but something that makes sense that with relation to what's going on now, today. What makes sense that you can do to offset what's going on now, depending on people's choices, what they're doing, what they're choosing to do. So the fear wave, the bugs that in your experience could be these nanos that Mike Adams is talking about, these virus nano creatures. So you're seeing it. I mean, you're always on top of it. Seems like what you're seeing. So thanks again, and I'll give it over to Tim.
Yeah, hi. It's all pretty hard to relate to in ways about these experiences of this, what Kevin's calling the simulator, and what we've come through to try to understand what's real. Like, it's just, we hear of, like Paul mentioned, about these yugas or things about time and this golden and silver and bronze, and now supposedly it's the iron experience to be going through. And in time measurements, it seems like he put an exact date for some reason back then about which we entered this Iron Age during the Egyptian times, and it is supposed to be in time 600 and plus 1,000 years, and we've only got like 5,000 years so far in this Iron Age example that he put out before the end of the simulator and the equal times of it being and it not being. So it seems like in time, it's a long time before this Earth is going to be done with these cycles, or this present cycle that we're going through.
Okay, so you're giving us hope, huh, Tim? We still have time, huh? According to Paul here.
Yeah, that was then why he would put that kind of statement out and stuff about when the Iron Age started and how long it lasts, and all the stuff that he also made all those predictions too in one of his books, the Akvija, that sounded like he was saying what the effects would be of the causes that we've caused. So who knows until we know.
Well, the interesting thing, yeah, he did mention the yellow race, didn't he? The yellow race being the next dominant race. Well, that's what Mike Adams is talking about here. The Chinese are basically, they've been buying up property here in the United States, and etc. But he talks about them being very, very much in this. The virus was created, or at least developed further in the Wuhan there in China. But they want the farmland here. They want to basically take over, according to him. And I've heard that from other sources too. Kim Gugane, who's like a galactic representative.
Yeah, maybe the Chinese people are easily influenced still, or controlled, or whatever it is, from the causes they're reaping their effects at this time. And yes, if it's reptilian leader of the Chinese people, or the leaders are all reptilian or something, maybe that's who they want to have on the Earth as humanoids that will be changed into the part animal and part machine beings that they can control. Because just like over there in North Korea and stuff like that, look at the way that we hear the propaganda says those people are totally under control. They can't even watch a TV show or listen to a radio, and they have to do certain things, or it's just death for them. So yes, lots of, maybe the Mongoloid period will be, and Paul that's back then though, but was giving those examples of time and what's going to take place that he was seeing or predicting would happen because of the causes that are taking place right now. So the effects will be coming. There's no end to this insanity about building these atomic bombs and all these war machines and bullets and guns and all over this earth. It's a demon land. Everybody accepts it as, oh boy, this is the way to be. I got to protect myself and my family, and I got to go to war when the government tells you to go kill people because they're supposedly a threat when they're actually not in your face, to deal with. So I can see that they loved the show when it's so violent and all the action, blowing things up and killing these little rats or whatever they call us, the humans, the dumb little humans that seem to be easily something that's entertaining for them to put them through whatever they want to, and everybody being so obedient to the powers that be, or else you go to jail, or else you get killed unless you have some kind of protection, like real guides actually interfering with them trying to do certain things to certain ones, like Dwayne or something, without protection at any time. If they were irritated, they sounds like they know our frequencies, each person, where you are, and there's no escape. It's just have to deal with whatever they come up, attempt to do, especially to you yourself, besides everybody else, whether it's the poisoning of the air, or these chips that are, and this new dust that'll wipe out all these people by the millions, and they hope billions, I guess, to have their certain amount that they feel comfortable with to control. And it's a interesting experience. And here we have this new presentation that's revealing certain things about life that it seems like we've all been unaware of for so many lifetimes, and maybe we had the opportunities, but we didn't really think it was that important. So who knows? This darkness does sound like it's just part of the cycles, is how I see it. Even if we have to come back another whole bunch of cycles or yugas or whatever they're called, whatever it takes to get to that point where we can earn our way and have the real guides in our lives and guiding us through that black barrier to the real universes that we're separated from here in the physical or in the psych realms. We sure go through a lot of wondering and experiences.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you for your viewpoint. Okay, Kevin, next experience.
In this real side experience, I would find myself in a curious situation indeed, as it seemed to be a battle of a kind. Any battle or confrontation is, of course, a creationally based situation. Overall, we have then, broadly speaking, two ideas. And these two ideas, these two sides to a battle, comprised of various other ideas that make up each opposing side: the attitudes, thoughts, emotions, intent, ideals, etc. And the way we ensure we remain in creation is by placing our focus, our attention, our agreement on created ideas, and taking those ideas on, clinging to them, incorporating them, and being the effects therefore of them, unconsciously or consciously. A battle is as good a focus claimer, an agreement securer, as any other created idea, and hence why the dark forces like to set up battles, like to present both sides, the good and the bad, so-called, and indeed play both sides, as they well know that any engaging and aligning with either side is agreement, which will retain all that do agree as their slaves in the simulators and into future lifetimes, whereas the whole idea is to not agree with anything already established, with all its restricting idea baggage, and to create a new position, one that is beneficial with the whole of life, and any confrontation then is on the part of those in agitation of what is being beneficially referenced and presented. So we must ensure we remain in a position while operating in creation of one that isn't falling into the polarity of opposites, especially when it comes to the endless created scenarios of the good side versus the bad. This would also extend to the real side, as our intent will be revealed to us there. And if we are inclined to join in the fight of good versus evil, and get therefore embroiled in the cause and effect of agreeing to such ideas that each so-called side represents, we probably will be in similar situations on the real side, as we have our agreements and intents revealed to us on the real side. The confrontation we will continue to receive as we go through our process, as we face the whole of creation, but we ought pay attention to any real side scenarios that suggest we are being sidetracked into agreeing with a created idea that has us falling back into cause and effect creation, including the created battles. But anyway, as I was saying, we had a kind of a battle taking place here. The opposing sides were not so much awareness inhabiting humanoid body forms as you'd have expected, but more a divide line between what looked like nature and a technological distortion. The visual of the experience was rather a pickle for the personal self to make sense of, like entering a movie theatre halfway through the film. It was a darkened, gloomy, outside setting, and this mass of foliage, trees, etc., the natural environment, was very animated, as though the tree and plant body forms had been afforded greater mobility. What the natural environment overall seemed discontented about was the infringement of this technology, which amassed on the opposite side of this scene. The technology was represented as distorted in this real side experience, as all technology in fact is, looking here like twisted, malformed metal infused with organic material also, as though it had all been meshed crudely together. I could see what looked like the vague semblance of human limbs, eyeballs, and various random parts of body forms amidst all this metallic mess. and indeed this overall mass of technology was constantly stretching and reaching for the natural environment side, and should it seize anything of it, a tree, plant, or a bush, it would drag it into itself and assimilate it. Then you would see the natural environment parts, trees, plants, or bush, now infused with parts of this technology, etc. The all-natural environment is the ears expressed through the life levels, and although the ears is a reality that can't be encroached upon or affected in any way by any creational idea imposition, the natural environment body forms that the real awareness is encased in certainly can. And this was rather similar to real side experiences where people have reported the protestations and concerns expressed through the real awareness of animals also, where they are having to be the recipients also of what is being decided by the unconscious, unaware masses, and their process is being interfered with as a consequence, even though they are not a contributing factor to the demise of the natural environment, as everything they do makes sense and is in alignment with life through their pure, real awareness standings. I was stood with the natural environment here, but wasn't part of this battle, more that I was standing with the all-natural environment representing the ears and expressing my supporting of it through my real awareness. This did seem to be then the natural environment body types, the trees, etc., almost expressing their discontent with the technology on the real side, just as the animals have been, especially as it seemed that this technology was absorbing and assimilating it. For perhaps, yes, humans may have to deal with this technology, even the robotization that befalls them, as we all have had a hand in the overall creational effects we are experiencing through the agreements we have ventured up until now. But trees, plants, and animals will have to also suffer these potential scenarios. Although I must say that whereas humans will have to deal with the bombardment of thoughts supplied to them through external technological sources, if they do become robotized, in theory, animals and plants won't be thus afflicted. Theoretically, then, this should make no difference to the plants and animals, other than an alteration of their body types, as they still will be connected with their real awareness, and not struggling with the personal thought forms and the effects of them as humans do. Created thoughts, either by our own design or those fed to us through technology. It's more that, through what has been decided, the humans robotized then have to deal with the effects of having thought forms supplied to them, external of their free will choice to create them, that they still will have to be the effects of, as per the design of cause to effect experience generated through the body vehicles, though more so for those who are stuck in their personal selves with no connection to their real awareness. So even though the natural environment and animals are suffering the effects that others are deciding and expressing their concerns on the real side, they won't be resigned to effects through causes that are fed technologically to them through thought forms, etc., for they operate from their real awareness position and are therefore immune, as it were, to being embroiled in cause and effect, and this would then apply also for any individual on their process of awareness. If they stand in their real awareness, the nowness of their real selves, as the animals and trees do, then they may be robotized, but not subject to being caught in creation, as the unaware, personal self immersed only would. For regardless of where these thought forms come from an external, technological fed source through the robot form, a subliminal, or just a random activated thought through the personal self. If we are indifferent to it all, we can't be trapped and absorbed into the effects of it. Duane, the great writer, responded to this real side experience at the time of the sharing of it, and I quote, "Things are cooking, and it's the big picture. Those that get involved and do their part are going to see a whole lot more. We have a lot to do here, a huge challenge, but we can get through it. What you're sharing is very, very real."
Thank you. Okay, well, yeah, we have a big big challenge here. And like Rebisar said to Duane, you know, it's a big nut to crack when he wanted to take over the world and, you know, for the benefit of everybody and what all that means, take over the world, the creation, and see. So there's lots to do. It's never what you think it is. It's always better as long as your intent is there with the real awareness. So let's get on and do it. Thanks, Kevin, for everything you do, and thanks, Tim, for being here and what you do and all your reading and all that. So we can end it here with a new you. New you. Tim?
New you.
Kevin?
NUUU.